Hey everyone, welcome to Amanda's Book Corner. I'm Amanda, and believe it or not, February is almost over already. It went by really fast. Of course, it always does. It is a short month. But March is almost here, and that means it's almost time to start our March reading challenge. So my reading challenge for March is to read classics and retellings of classics. So you can take this however you want. You can read retellings of classic novels, retellings of mythology, retellings of fairy tales, whatever it is that you're interested in reading. Yeah, all of it is completely valid here. For me, personally, I'm going to be reading classic novels, well, rereading at least one or two, and then reading retellings of those classic novels. So for this list, I'm just going to focus on recommendations of books that are retellings of classic novels. I'm not going to include anything from mythology or fairy tales or legends or folklore. None of that's going to make it into the list because otherwise this video would be 10 hours long. Also, I should note that this will not be a comprehensive list because even within the more narrow frame of classic novel retellings, there's still a million of them, and like if I tried to make it comprehensive, A, I'd probably still miss a bunch, and B, again, this video would be hours and hours long, so no one needs that many recommendations. So I'll just focus on a few that are on my radar, that look interesting to me, and are fairly recent. My own plan for this month is to reread Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre. I do love the Bronte sisters, and I haven't read these books since I was in high school and college, respectively. Well, the opposite of that. But anyway, I haven't read these books in a long time, over a decade anyway. So I'm planning to reread those, and following Jane Eyre specifically, I have a bunch of novels that are retellings of Jane Eyre. So let's start with those ones. First up is a book called Mr. Rochester. If you've read Jane Eyre, you'll know that Mr. Rochester is the love interest. And so this book looks really interesting. It came out a few years ago, I think in 2016 or 17. And this one, unlike Jane Eyre, follows Mr. Rochester specifically. So the author here reimagines what his life was like and what his perspective on things is. And so I'm really excited to read this one. This is the first one I'm going to read after reading Jane Eyre. Next on my list is John Eyre. I just read a book by Mimi Matthews last month and I really loved it, so I'm excited to read this one. So John Eyre, as you can probably surmise from the title, this one is a gender-flipped version of Jane Eyre. So instead of a young woman, it's a young man who goes and works for this family. So I'm really interested to see this one. Also, I kind of got a spoiler from an author interview that I listened to, and it sounds like it's not just a Jane Eyre retelling. There's also another novel thrown in there. I'm not going to tell you what it is for fear of spoiling it for you. I already know, whoops, but I'm sure I'll still enjoy it just as much, so that's fine. So I'm excited to read this one. So that last book just came out last year, 2021. This next book also did. It's called Within These Wicked Walls. So this one looks really interesting. This one I think is an Ethiopian-inspired retelling of Jane Eyre. So I like how this one gives us different characters who are people of color, and I think it's going to give a very different perspective. Also, this is a YA book, so I'm sure it'll have a slightly different tone than the other books have, but I'm really excited to read this one, so I'm going to be reading this one as well in March. Another book from 2021, I think that was the year of the Jane Eyre retellings, but another book is called The Wife Upstairs. This is a thriller that's kind of a Southern Gothic, and it's set somewhere in the South, I forgot where exactly. I've heard mixed reviews about this one, but I am pretty intrigued about it. The author has a new book that just came out as well, which also has mixed reviews, but we'll see. So if I have time, I'm going to try to read this one as well. And the last one is also a book that came out last year, 2021. There was something going on there. But anyway, it's called The Death of Mrs Rochester, and like the previous one I just mentioned, it's also a contemporary thriller, and I'm really excited about that one. I think it's set in San Francisco, somewhere in California, and as the title suggests, it seems to follow the death of Mr. Rochester's secret wife. So we'll see about that. It looks interesting. Okay, so let's move on to Jane Austen. Jane Austen has a ton of retellings. I think she might have the most of any author, especially Pride and Prejudice. I think Pride and Prejudice alone has like 10 billion different retellings, and so it seems like every month there are more coming out, so I'm not even going to try to like scratch the tip of the iceberg with that one. But I will mention a few. So one author that I do want to mention, and I'll start with, is Sonali Dev. She has an entire series called the Rajas series, and each book is a retelling of a different Jane Austen novel. So the first book in her series is Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors, and it looks like a fun kind of foodie retelling of Pride and Prejudice. The second book is Recipe for Persuasion, which is another food-based one, this one obviously retelling Persuasion. The third one is In Scent and Sensibility, which looks really cute. And the fourth one, which comes out in May, so just a couple months from now, is called The Emma Project. I haven't read any of these yet, but I did read a different book by Sonali Dev last month, and I've decided that I need to go out and collect all 4 of those books and read them all. So I don't know when that'll happen, but I do plan to read her books hopefully sometime this year. And that series looks really cute, so I'm going to start with that. Speaking of Pride and Prejudice, let's look at a few more retellings that are fairly recent that are on my radar. One is called The Other Bennett Sister, and it looks really great. This one is a book that follows the sister Mary, and she gets her own book, her own story in this one. It came out, I think, 2 years ago, and I really want it. I think I might get it for my sister, unless she already got it for herself. I can't remember. But that's a book that I think my sister would really love, and if she loves it, I think I'll borrow it from her and read it too. Another one that I like to read is called Aisha at Last. This one is a Muslim retelling of Pride and Prejudice, and I think it's also a contemporary retelling. I have a different book by that author that's sitting on my shelf waiting for me to read it, but this one is definitely another one that's high on my list from the author, and it looks like a really cute retelling, and so it's definitely another one that's higher up on my list of retellings to read. There's also a couple of YA retellings I want to mention. One popular one, well, I think it's popular, it's called Pride, and it's a YA retelling with Black Latinx characters. It's set in Brooklyn, and it kind of touches on themes of gentrification. Again, this one highlights characters of color, and I think it looks like a really great book, and although I'm kind of reading YA a little bit less lately, this might be one that I would also go back and get. And another one that's fairly recent, which is another YA novel, is called Pride and Premeditation. So this one is kind of a whodunit take on Pride and Prejudice, and it follows Lizzie Bennett, who is an aspiring lawyer, and she has to work with Mr. Darcy on solving this case of this murder. And so it looks like a really fun and very different take on Pride and Prejudice, so this is definitely another one that I would get. So let's jump back in time a little bit and talk about Romeo and Juliet by Shakespeare. I have two books that are retellings of Romeo and Juliet that are on my shelf that I plan to read. One, which I think I'll read this month, is Ramon and Julieta. This is a book that just came out a couple weeks ago, and it's a Mexican retelling of Romeo and Juliet, and has to do with tacos, and so if you love tacos and Mexican food in general, this might be a fun one. This one looks really cute, and it's actually the first, I think, in a trilogy, and so I'll be reading this one hopefully this month because it looks really fun. Another Romeo and Juliet retelling that I'm planning to read is called These Violent Ends by Chloe Gong. This came out about 1.5 years ago, late 2020, and this one is set in 1920s Shanghai, and it looks like a very different and fun retelling. I think it's a little bit fantasy too, and so I do need to read this one, and it also has a sequel called Our Violent Ends, which I assume also continues that story, so assuming that this one's good, I'll have to get that other book as well. Another book that's on my shelf that I plan to get to is called Dracula, which is a retelling of Dracula. I have it as an audiobook, and so I do hope I can listen to that this month. I haven't actually read Dracula. I don't know why. I just haven't ever read it, but I'm familiar with the story, and so I think Dracula is kind of a prequel to Dracula, so I think that one will be really fun. Another classic novel that I have not read is The Great Gatsby, and so a retelling of that, which came out I think last summer, is called The Chosen and the Beautiful. This one was getting a lot of buzz when it came out, and the author's new book that's coming out is also getting a lot of buzz. And so The Chosen and the Beautiful takes the characters and it makes some changes. They're queer, they're Asian, and I think it looks like a really interesting retelling of the novel. I might have to go back and read The Great Gatsby first, or I might just watch the movie, I don't know. But I think this is definitely a book that I want to get to, hopefully this year. If you like Leo Tolstoy and his book Anna Karenina, there is a YA retelling of that book called Anna K. This is a modern retelling and it's set in Manhattan, and the author I believe is Asian, and so I think this one also has different kinds of characters than you saw in the Russian original, and I think it looks like a really interesting one. It was a book of the month pick when it came out, I think a year or two ago, and it has a sequel as well, and so this could be a fun one to read, especially if you like YA adaptations. One classic novel that has been sitting on my shelf for way too long, and I've just been kind of too intimidated to read it, is Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes. It's like 1,000 pages long, and I don't know, that just seems like way too much for me. But there is a retelling of it that came out about a year or two ago called Quixote, and this one is set in modern times in Trump's America, and it highlights characters who are Asian and the kind of racism they face and the kind of Islamophobia that they face. This book has gotten some awards, and so it definitely is something that looks interesting to read. I think I still might need to read Don Quixote first, but we'll see. Once I read that one, I might go out and check out this one as well. Okay, one classic book I actually have read is Frankenstein. I read that one when I was in college, and I really enjoyed it. It actually made me really angry how horribly everyone mistreated the monster, but that's a discussion for another video. But anyway, if you like Frankenstein, there's a few books that are retellings of that. One is called Frankenstein, which, yes, has the word kiss right in there. It's a romance retelling, so that looks fun and very different. I do love it when retellings kind of change the genre around or change the kind of characters. I think that one looks really fun. Another one, which in this case changes the setting, is called Frankenstein in Baghdad. So of course this one is set in Baghdad, and I think it's also a more contemporary setting. And it kind of is a very different take on how the Frankenstein monster was created, and I think it looks really interesting. And another one that's not out yet, I think comes out later this year, I think in August or September, I forget when exactly, is called Unnatural Creatures, a novel of Frankenstein's women. It's by Chris Wilder. I have another book of hers on my shelf. I think it's behind me somewhere. Here it is, The Lost History of Dreams. And so I need to read that one. It's actually a book I keep looking at longingly. But I'm also really excited for her new book, which, again, it has that different perspective on the book, and in this case, we get to follow the women who are in Frankenstein's life, so I think that looks really fun. By the way, off topic, but I just have to say there's an excellent song called Frankenstein by a band called Editors, and every time I mention the name Frankenstein, I think of that song. So if you want to add music to your life, that's a song that you should listen to. Anyway, back to the books. One final book that I want to recommend is a retelling of The Island of Dr. Moreau. Again, I haven't read this book because I was a very bad English major, apparently. I've read H.G. Wells' other books, but not that one. But a retelling that I'm very excited about is called The Daughter of Dr. Moreau, which is by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. She's one of my favorite authors. I've read most of her books, but I still have a few that I have to catch up on. But I really love her books. I love how different each one is from the other ones. She never really repeats herself. And so one of my most anticipated books of this year is The Daughter of Dr. Moreau, which in this case is set in Mexico in the 1800s. And so I'm really excited to see how her take on it is. But again, I think I might need to read the original first to make sure I get the most out of it. So there you have a fairly short list of different retellings of classic novels. I'm sure there are hundreds and hundreds that I missed. So if you have any favorites, please let me know. Tell me in the comments what other classic retellings you think I should be reading and that other people should be reading. I'd love to get your recommendations on that. Also, please let me know if you'd like me to make additional lists of retelling novels. I can make lists of retellings of mythology, of fairy tales, legends, folklore, anything you want. So just let me know if you found this list fun and if you'd like me to make additional lists like that. Scarlett, come here. Okay, so my cat decided to join me for the end of the video. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, comment, and subscribe. And to make sure you don't miss any more of my videos, please ring the bell to get all my notifications. I put out about 2 to 3 book review videos every week, as well as 1 to 2 videos like this one, like vlogs and listicles. So thanks for watching this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!